We are 110%. We serve the park and recreation industry by advocating for ethical decision-making, strengthening leadership competencies, and ensuring the financial sustainability of parks and recreation. Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to take this opportunity to share one of our favorite financial sustainability case studies based on an engagement with the City of Napa Parks and Recreation Department. The case study highlights how your work in the park and recreation industry can truly make a difference. What comes to mind when you think about the Napa Valley? If you're anything like me, your mind immediately jumps to elements associated with wine and wealth. Napa County is known as one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's no surprise that in 2023, it attracted more than 3.7 million visitors. While most people associate Napa with wine country, it is also a haven for outdoor lovers. More than 75% of Napa County residents live within half a mile of a park. The area also boasts some of the cleanest water in the nation. However, Napa's dry and moderate Mediterranean climate comes with some substantial environmental risks. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has given Napa County a risk index of 97.7 out of 100. If you direct your attention to the map on the bottom right corner of the screen, you'll get a snapshot of the risk levels the region faces for specific natural disasters. Essentially, the redder the chart, the greater the danger. Napa County is at very high risk for drought, high risk for earthquakes, landslides, and flooding. It is also at moderate risk for wildfires. But these risks do not deter domestic and international visitors from seeking out the luxury and comfort for which Napa is renowned. According to a recent impact study, visitors spent more than $2.5 billion in Napa County in 2023. This influx of tourists translated into more than 16,000 jobs and earned Napa the win for the best weekend getaway in America from U.S. News & World Report in 2024. Napa County residents also take home higher salaries, with median incomes nearing 6 figures per year. That's 35% higher than the national average. The county also has an incredibly low poverty rate, just under 8%. That's 44% lower than the national average. Unfortunately, those higher incomes come with a higher cost of living. Approximately 40% of Napa County residents spend about a third of their monthly income on housing. To make up that difference, residents must work an average of 57 hours a month. For those of you doing the math at home, that translates to more than 2 extra 8-hour workdays a month. On the bright side, Napa is also one of the most diverse areas in the country. It ranks in the top 5% on the National Diversity Index, as described by the U.S. Census Bureau. Even more impressive is the fact that residents are 25% less racially and ethnically segregated than the rest of the United States. While there is more overall diversity in Napa, the county has 2.2 times more racial disparity in educational achievement. That means racial minorities are less likely to graduate with a high school degree relative to their white counterparts. Now, armed with this robust understanding of Napa, let's dig into our case study worth celebrating. Join Earl the Squirrel as we travel back to 2020. On March 11, 2020, after more than 100,000 confirmed cases in 100-plus countries around the world, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. 2 days later, the President of the United States declared a nationwide emergency. On that same day, the Napa Valley Unified School District closed all schools across Napa and American Canyon. Schools remained shuttered for the rest of the academic year, leaving thousands of students and educators at sea. Just 5 days later, Napa County public health officials issued orders for citizens to remain at home unless engaged in essential activities. As a result of the world grinding to a halt, Napa experienced a precipitous drop in tourism and lost almost all associated tax revenue. Less than a month later, the Napa City Council projected a massive budget shortfall of $20 million for the year. As such, they recommended eliminating 70 positions from across the city's government. 31 of those cuts would be realized from hiring freezes, and another 39 from layoffs. The Parks and Recreation Department was set to be one of the hardest hit areas. More than 40% of layoffs would come from that department. A quick point of order here. Before the proposed layoffs, the City of Napa's Parks and Recreation Department had approximately 40 staff members. Based on the number of residents and the total acreage of Napa, the National Park and Recreation Association survey indicated that the city should have had 65 staff to meet the nationwide average. After the proposed layoffs, the department would be left with only 1/3 of the recommended staff. The only viable path forward? Radically reducing staffing, formally dissolving the Parks and Recreation Department, and moving any remaining staff to the Public Works or Community Development departments. The council's proposal enraged Napa residents. They launched a change.org petition to fight for the Parks and Recreation Department. Nearly 4,500 individuals signed the petition before a critical council vote in June of 2020. That number continued to grow to well over 10,000. Department employees self-organized to peacefully protest the proposed layoffs and departmental dissolution. Meanwhile, one member of the Parks and Recreation team started forming an idea. You see, back in 2018, the department worked on a management plan with 110%. For our purposes, you can think of this as a strategic plan. Funnily enough, one of the action items was to create a cost recovery strategy. Faced with the threat of elimination, creating a financial sustainability plan offered a glimmer of hope to realize cost savings. So Katrina pitched the idea to her director. The plan was an opportunity not just to cut costs, but to fix an unsustainable system using data-driven decision-making. The team first needed to establish a realistic picture of the department's operating costs. So they got to work compiling their operating expenses and revenue from 2013 to 2019. They discovered that the operating expenses had increased by more than $2.5 million, whereas revenue growth had remained largely flat. For those of you keeping track, expenses outpaced revenue growth by nearly 10 times. The team then looked at their annual budget. On average, Napa spent approximately $7 million a year on operating expenses. They allocated an additional $858,000 to their Capital Improvement Plan, CIP for short. Money from CIP funds capital improvement projects, purchases, and studies that involve long-term changes to property or assets within a system. That money can be allocated to acquiring, building, maintaining, or upgrading assets and properties to increase their value and capabilities. Napa's annual CIP investment accounted for just under 11% of their total annual budget. For context, the national industry average is 20%. As we know, a 20% investment in capital projects falls well short of what's needed to keep parks and recreation facilities across the country in good condition. Based on the CIP investment data, what do you think the condition of Napa's resources were relative to other local groups across the country? A, worse, B, the same, or C, better? Pause if you need more time to answer. The correct answer is worse. Initially, Napa estimated that they would need nearly $90 million in investment to bring their equipment and parks up to good operating conditions. However, based on the city's most recent 2024 conditions assessment, they realized they only needed $70 million. That said, with less than an average of 11% CIP investment, the city would never be able to make a meaningful dent on their necessary capital improvement plans. Armed with good, though perhaps depressing figures, Katrina and her team reached out to 110% to develop a cost recovery strategy in the fall of 2020. Napa worked through 110%'s three-legged stool model, as shown on the screen. Here you can see an illustrative timeline of the end-to-end financial sustainability process. You can see from the Gantt chart, Napa kicked off the project with the cost of service analysis, which ran concurrently with the service category development and beneficiary of service work. So let's dig into the cost of service analysis. This work requires a great deal of coordination to capture all relevant data. The first step in the process is to compile a master list of all services offered by an organization. As a reminder, we at 110% define services in the park and recreation industry as activities, courses, classes, events, rentals, and other types of leisure experiences. The second step in the process is to gather cost data for each of these services. The team first gathered direct costs, which are defined as any cost that can be traced directly to the provision of a service. Direct costs include things like equipment needed for services, instructor fees, processing fees, and/or food for these events and services. They also gathered all the indirect costs. Indirect costs are things like utilities, staff salaries, building space, and office equipment. The group then worked to attribute as many of these indirect costs to the services as possible. They used both percent of the whole estimations for staff time and square foot facility fees as applicable. Now, while that cost of service analysis was going on, the department also got to work on defining their service categories. As a reminder, service categories mean where like purpose is the principal consideration in the cataloging of services, as opposed to the likeness of service. For example, an intro to cardio class, a children's baseball introduction clinic, or a pottery 101 class would fall under the same service category, Learn To programs. Napa's finalized service categories are shown here. What are the advantages of using service categories instead of service areas? Please select all correct answers from the list. A. They promote specific age and/or special interest groups. B. They promote equitable decisions. C. They diminish the effect of social and personal values. D. They make cost recovery decisions more efficient. Pause if you need more time to answer. If you selected answers B, C, and D, you are correct. After aligning on their service categories, Napa then ranked these items with those most aligned to the common good, having lower numbers, and those most aligned with exclusive benefit, having higher numbers. As a reminder, services more aligned with common good are essential services. They have community-wide impact. These are services intended to influence social and environmental issues. Typically, there are no similar or like services provided by nonprofits, non-governmental, and/or the private sectors. Alternatively, exclusive benefit services, or special interests, benefit individuals more than the common or greater good. These services are discretionary, nice to have. They have less community-wide impact. Typically, similar services are provided by nonprofit, non-governmental, and/or the private sector. So again, here are Napa's 10 service categories and their final rankings. It's important to note that Napa carried out these ranking exercises without having any cost of service data on hand. The Beneficiary of Service exercise is about aligning services to best serve the community. It is not about what these services cost or how these services should be priced. This is Napa's first Beneficiary of Service model. Most organizations complete this exercise with their staff and then present the results to other key stakeholders. However, the Napa team did something truly unique. All staff members, the City Council, and the Commission worked together to complete the service category ranking exercise. This was a total game changer. By co-creating the Beneficiary of Service model, people from all different groups were able to join Napa on their journey to financial sustainability. The team fostered goodwill while helping to educate key stakeholders on critical concepts and gaining buy-in for their efforts. Before we continue, let's review the benefits of developing a cost recovery strategy. 1. The work helps organizations understand current cost recovery. 2. It helps organizations understand current taxpayer spend. 3. It facilitates difficult decision-making. And 4. It allows organizations to understand their current financial condition. After roughly 4 months of work, the team pulled together their actual cost recovery percentages for all service categories. This information is shown on the screen now. In an ideal world, these cost recovery bars should increase moving from left to right. As you can see, they clearly don't. The team then integrated these actual cost recovery numbers with their Beneficiary of Service model. They used this information to generate their initial financial sustainability strategy. Napa was not only focused on cutting costs, but on reducing the amount of subsidies provided to exclusive benefit services. Any savings in these categories could then be redirected to those more aligned with the common good. As such, the department adopted subsidy language and percentages. However, since we are using the lens of cost recovery, let's refresh the model to use cost recovery percentages instead. The blue bars on the chart represent Napa's cost recovery goals, and the orange bars represent the actual cost recovery data from each service category. The gap between the bars indicates the amount of additional subsidy that was needed to fund each of the service categories. As we can see, some of the categories, like community events, outperformed their cost recovery goals. Other categories, particularly those on the right side of the model, most aligned with exclusive benefit, were radically underperforming. Looking at those top 4 exclusive benefit categories, the team discovered that more than $830,000 of additional subsidies needed to be allocated to make up for those cost recovery gaps. To put that figure in context, that's 97% of Napa's annual CIP investment. The team then really dug into the cost of service analysis, ranking each service by the cost recovery discrepancies. They identified 15 services with the biggest cost recovery gaps. Most fell into the top-ranked categories most aligned with exclusive benefit. They determined that the highest cost recovery discrepancy was more than 4 times higher than that of the next service. More than that, the subsidized difference accounted for roughly 20% of the total $830,000 funding gap. So what service had the biggest cost recovery gap? Creating and maintaining hanging flower baskets in the business district of Napa. This service required an additional annual subsidy of $170,000. Let's consider why this service in particular might merit more scrutiny and less subsidized funding. 1. The service fell into the category of specialized services, the most exclusive benefit service on Napa's Beneficiary of Service chart. 2. The primary cost driver of the project centered on the time spent by Parks and Rec staff hand watering these baskets. 3. The service was not particularly eco-friendly. If you recall, the Federal Emergency Management Agency ranked Napa at very high risk of drought. And finally, the service fell outside the scope of the team's purview. These baskets weren't in a City of Napa facility or park. Rather, the initiative was created by the Property and Business Improvement District, aka PBID. These baskets were intended to beautify downtown Napa to benefit local merchants. Based on general cost recovery principles, there were 3 primary options available for the team to pursue. Through door number 1, leave the service completely unchanged. Given the department's dire financial position, not really an option. Behind door number 2, find a way to reduce spend on the service. Once again, not particularly viable, given the native climate of the region. And 3, perhaps the most drastic, but arguably most effective option, divesting from the service entirely. This would not only save the additional subsidy money being poured into the project, but would eliminate all direct and indirect expenses associated with the service. Katrina and her team actually found a secret 4th option, one that was highly innovative. Instead of real flowers, the department proposed replacing these baskets with hanging art sculptures. The team's proposal stated that the department would need $150,000 in subsidy money to commission and install these hanging sculptures during that first year. That would have only been a net savings of $20,000. But if we look beyond the first year spend, we can see the ongoing maintenance cost would drop to just $5,000 to $10,000 in each subsequent year. The cost recovery for the service would then well exceed the target goal of 90%, thanks to drastically cut staff time spent on daily watering. Moreover, the proposal had the benefit of being more sustainable from an environmental impact perspective. And finally, the project would give local artists greater exposure by having their work featured throughout the downtown business district of Napa. The team presented the public art proposal to the PBID board, and while the measure passed the first round of voting, it failed to advance in subsequent rounds. However, the innovative idea helped facilitate conversations between the department and the board to reach a mutually beneficial compromise. Instead of having 2 cycles of flowers per year, the department would supply flowers only once a year. Moreover, they would only hand water these flowers during the summer season. Those 2 simple changes allowed the team to reduce the overall subsidy amount by more than $65,000 annually. Those savings were driven by reductions in both direct and indirect costs. The department secured an increase in funding support from the Property and Business Improvement District. That annual $65,000 in savings translated from a cost of service recovery of 33% to nearly 50%. Energized by their success, the team is now considering other avenues to improve cost recovery numbers. In 2024, Napa conducted a self-directed cost of service analysis. They relied on the same process used with 110%. The blue bars on the chart represent the cost recovery goal for each service. The orange bars represent the 2018-2019 actual cost recovery numbers, and the new tan bars represent the 2021-2022 data. Overall, the results have been positive, with improved cost recovery in many service categories, particularly those on the rightmost side of the chart associated with exclusive benefit. Those top 4 categories now receive an additional subsidy of just over $400,000. It's a 50% reduction in additional subsidies. These overall savings are equivalent to almost half of what Napa's annual CIP investment was. By conducting a deep dive and thorough analysis of the data, Katrina and her team were able to reduce operating costs, decrease cost recovery gaps in many service categories, particularly those most aligned with exclusive benefit, and redirect funds from service categories outperforming their targets to improve the department's overall financial sustainability. The Napa team proves that your work can truly make a difference. To wrap up, 3 things were vital to Napa's success. 1. Failure was not an option for the team. The department faced complete elimination. The underlying urgency of the situation demanded attention, action, and creativity. 2. Each and every step of the way, Katrina and her team made sure to get buy-in across the board. Their approach was truly unique and wildly successful. By investing time and energy to involve not only the staff, but the board, the city council, and different advisory groups, Katrina and her team created a shared language by defining service categories and co-creating a beneficiary of service model. And when the team had all the cost of service analysis data, they made sure to share the full financial reality, using actual data to key stakeholders, not just their proposed goals. And finally, Napa created a set of policies to act as guardrails for their department. While not covered in this video, these policies help launch and continue to ensure the financial sustainability strategy for the group. The 3 policies Napa created centered on financial sustainability, capital investment, and social equity. Napa set itself up for success by ensuring that funding would go to projects most aligned with the common good and its organization's mission. Before we close out the case study, we'd like to take this opportunity to share some words directly from Katrina Gregory. The cost recovery process is the single most important thing I have done in my 15-plus year career in Parks and Recreation. Our organization gained invaluable insights about our current operations and now have the tools to create long-lasting and impactful change for our department and community. By taking a deep dive and analyzing how we are spending taxpayer dollars, we are fully committed to being the responsible fiscal stewards of the resources that have been entrusted to us. To hear the latest updates on the continued great work of the City of Napa Parks and Recreation Department, please click here. We hope you have enjoyed this case study presentation. If you'd like to learn more, join the hundreds of agencies who have discovered what's possible with 110%. Believe in possibility.